Once per lecture, so only one person gets a bit. Everybody else will be fine.
You want to sit up front? Where are you from?
We can put one on the side too, but.
Do you have another t-shirt, Keely?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So why don't you sit here? Someone sit there. Why don't you sit there? I'm one of the volunteers. I can see it. What? Oh, yes. Okay, now sit down. Now I'm volunteer.
That counter is pretty good.
Cool. Okay, welcome to Little Thompson Observatory. My name is Maita. I'm one of your volunteers here. We have a smattering of volunteers around. Most of the people with little buttons on. If you have any questions, ask them. If you want to give any money, you can give it to them. How many people have not been here before? Let's see, a show of hands. Wow. The story of our life. We've been here 12 years now. And still we have people that haven't been here before. So let me give you a quick, short introduction. Tripping over the course.
Oh, are you?
Well, we kind of moved.
Okay.
Because we thought we were going to put some chairs there.
Little Thompson Science Foundation is running the Little Thompson Observatory here. It's a separate non-profit organization, separate from the school, although it is on school grounds. And the reason it's on school grounds is that we do not claim to be real astronomers, although we have real telescopes here. And it's real cold up there. But we like to get K through 12 students and anybody else who still is learning or can still be learning to not be afraid of math, physics, science in general. And we're using astronomy as a teaching tool. So the big thing that we're doing here basically is show and tell with lots and lots of schools and lots of groups. We're open any night or any day of the year by appointment, so you can go to our website, make an appointment, starkids.org, and we'll put a volunteer in here for your group. You can come with your family, you can come boyfriend, girlfriends, you can come with a bunch of kids, it doesn't matter. It's your evening, we'll have a volunteer to run the telescope for you. You bring clear skies, and we'll do the rest, right? The only thing we cannot control yet. Right, John?
Yeah, real clear sky sign though. You guys did good.
If we were on top of the mountains, we would probably have more chance of clear skies, but then nobody would come because it's way too hard to get there, especially with weather like tonight. So basically, we're an all-volunteer organization that is in the education business. We've opened our doors in 1999. And this month or next month, it's very close, we are planning to welcome our 50,000th visitor in this place with groups like this or individual evenings. About 68 to 70% is K through 12, our target audience. So hopefully we can continue that mission. We thought after a couple of years it would kind of fade away in oblivion, but we still get 4,000 to 5,000 visitors per year in this little place. What else can I say? We run off donations. We write for grants, but it's all volunteer based and nobody gets paid. We have t-shirts, we have mugs, we got little telescopes there, Galileo scope. We got some cool books from Brian White, which will be our next Star Night presentation, January 20th, I believe, the third Friday in January. Brian White will do his 3D slideshow on the Aurora Borealis, and maybe some of the comets like Hale-Bopp and Hyakutake. He has done it for many years here. We're doing that in the auditorium of the high school, so right across our walk. There will be volunteers directing you there. And it's a really cool show to see the Aurora Borealis with a lot of the foreground information in 3D. You get the funny glasses on, so everybody can kind of have fun there. So that is our next Public Star Night in January. Tonight is a special Christmas presentation. We have not done this before, so we haven't seen this presentation yet. But John Ensworth, our speaker of tonight, one of our volunteers, wanted to do this presentation. He has done it many years at the Oklahoma City Planetarium, where he used to work. John is kind of a scientist. He reviews any and all educational materials that NASA publishes and reviews it for age appropriateness and for accuracy before it gets published in the schools and in the general literacy. So it's very nice that he came from Virginia, settled down in Longmont, and became kind of part of our volunteer crew here. He's also done talks about quantum physics, about the theory of everything. So if you really want to get your head spun off, sometime later on next year, we'll probably do that theory of everything again, where we go from Aristotle to the latest discoveries on the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland. It's a lot of fun, but it kind of hurts your brain. Anyway, tonight we'll do the presentation on the Star of Bethlehem. What was it? Where was it? He will go through some of the religious texts. He will go back through some of the scientific records. And he'll run some simulations back in time to figure out when it was, not in the year zero, right? And what it was. So that'll be a very interesting presentation for tonight. Afterwards, we will have the telescope ready again. It's still very clear, very cold. So if we want to go do some observing then, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. We are dressed for it, and I'm not sure if you guys are. So with that, John.
Well, thank you very much for coming out in the cold. Your shopping must be done, and you must be tired of being cooped up because of the snow, I guess. I don't know. So, this time of year, of course, we have Christmas trees in our homes, and on top, often a star. And the props department messed up here, so no star in this one, but this all goes back to the Star of Bethlehem, or the Star of Wonder, as some people have called it, that led three wise guys across great distances to Bethlehem. And so we're going to take a look at that. Its real nature has been lost to history. I mean, it is recorded in the Bible, and we'll take a look at just a few of those places. But we can combine history and science and the scripture and try to take a look at what this may have been. Of course, it sure may have been just the glory of God, or angels, that led the Magi there. But I wouldn't have anything to say for 30 minutes if that was it. So could be, but now we know that God built everything, including the heavens and the stars and the universe itself. So maybe he built something into the operation of our solar system that had this happen. So we need to figure out the time. Let's see, figure out where this is. And as he said, it's not in year zero. Was there a year zero?
No.
No? Good answer. Yeah, back then zeros were even considered pretty evil. I mean, if you divide by zero, you get infinity, and that messes up your math. And so people played with zeros secretly. And so we go straight from 1 BC to 1 AD. And biblical historians tell us that Jesus was probably born in the BC years, before this 0 point. There are 7 major biblical references to the events surrounding the birth of Christ, and about 54 verses. So we have some material to work from, and you can see 3 of these are in the Old Testament, telling that what is going to come. So at this time, the Roman Empire was in full swing over the region. We had Gaius Octavian, who had been emperor of Rome since the year 27, was called himself Caesar Augustus, and Herod, King Herod, was in charge of the Judea region, and he was a pretty nasty dude. did lots of big buildings and structures that still stand today, but bad dude. We'll see more of him in just a moment. But the historian Flavius Josephus gives us an extra biblical view of some of the events that are happening at this time, and that will also help us narrow down the birth of Christ. So we have Herod's rule coming up into here to some unknown point here. We don't really know when Herod took control there, maybe around 38 BC, but we can use Josephus's writings to help us lock down on the date of Herod's death. He said that it's at the time of Passover, just before an eclipse of the moon. So there's the moon, nearly in total eclipse here. Anyone know why it's reddish?
Because it bends the light around the shadow of the earth.
Yeah, if we didn't have an atmosphere, of course you guys wouldn't be hearing me because we need air. But if you're on the moon at this time looking at the earth, you'd be seeing all the sunsets on the earth at the very same time. A big reddish ring around, so that's kind of cool. But moving forward here, we can run pre-detailed computer programs back and find out that March 13th of that year in 4 BC, using our calendar now, didn't use that calendar then, we have the lunar eclipse, so located right there. So that helps us narrow down the end of Herod's life. And the Bible tells us that Christ was born while Herod was king. So Herod died in the late winter of 4 BC. The birth of Jesus had to come before this date. All right, so let's go a little further. We know that Mary and Joseph came to Bethlehem at the time of the birth to be counted and taxed. That was a Roman decree. And we know that in 27 BC, 7 BC, and 14 AD, we have taxations that were announced across the Roman Empire. Now, they didn't have email, and they didn't have telegraphs. It took quite a while for news to spread out across the region, and then people to come to the places they had to be counted and paid. So we have these rather large blocks of time for the census. But this is obviously the one that we're going to be interested in. So, proclamation of 7 BC, in a year or two window, helps us get that part of the date locked down. So we have now 7, 6, 5, and 4 BC as possibility. Now, Jesus is taken into Egypt by Mary and Joseph because Herod, remember, bad guy, said that all male infants of a certain age had to be put to death. And that was to take care of the Christ child who was born. And so that locks it down to about 7 to 5 BC because they had to get out and then return. So now let's try to get some of the dates of Jesus' ministry figured out, and that'll also help us go back a little bit to narrow down when he was born. From Luke 3:23, we see Jesus is about 30 years of age at the start of his ministry. And Luke 3, his ministry started in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius. In John, we see there's a quote where he's talking with the Pharisees, and they ask, 46 years was this temple built, and you want to raise it in 3 days. So that helps us. We know when the temple was built, we can go back from that time. So around 28 AD was within a year or so of Jesus' 32nd birthday. So that helps us back up to narrow this down to about 6 to 5 BC. Remember BC, so the numbers go the other direction. Now, can we go any further? Can we get more precise than that? The Bible says that Jesus was born while the shepherds were in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. Of course, we're about to celebrate Christmas, and we're at the coldest time right now. We do it in December, and we're in a similar latitude to Israel, and it was cold and wet there too. So that would not be the time that shepherds would be out in the fields. They would probably be out in the fields at springtime. They had to keep an eye open for animals that would come and drag away the sheep. So this narrows it down to springtime of 6 BC for the birth of Christ. So why do we celebrate Christmas in December? And that seems really strange. How could we have that far off? Well, this all goes to the path of the sun in the sky. This is called the zodiac, and just like our big star wall right over there, we can plot the constellations of the zodiac, and this is where the sun is found throughout the year. That's what makes those constellations special. These zodiac means circle of animals. Not all of them are animals, but it's close. And as the sun goes ticking along, the days are longer, and the sun's energy is coming down more directly overhead. So when the sun is up here, we have the beginning of summer, the summer solstice. Just 2 days ago, the sun was down here at the very, very bottom. And so we had the winter solstice. Now the nights are the longest and the days are shorter. Just in the last couple of days, we've gained a little bit more sunlight each day, and that's going to continue now for a half a year. So this is actually the reason, and let's see why. As the sun dropped down, keeps sinking and sinking, ancient people, even without telescopes and like that, would see the sun getting lower, the days getting shorter, everything's getting colder. What if this process continued? Oh no! So the Romans were sophisticated enough that they weren't worried about the sun never coming back, because it always turned around and came higher in the sky, and the days got longer again. But they never passed up the chance to have a good party. So about the 25th of December is when, without telescopes, without any sophisticated equipment, you can start to detect that the sun is on its way up, the days are getting longer. And so you had that first evidence, and that was called the Saturnalia. Now, as the early Christians were in great danger of losing their lives to Roman persecution. And they noticed that if they celebrated the birth of Christ during the Saturnalia, nobody would notice them. It wouldn't stand out at all. So from that time, the birth of Christ has become traditionally celebrated on December 25th. Just in a couple days from now. All right, so now let's get back to the nature of the star, though. If God built meaning into the sky and used the heavens to predict that his son was coming to the earth, how might it have gone? All right. Well, let's take a look at what a star was back then. It could be just a little twinkling thing up there, but they didn't know what planets were. Planets were twinkling things, or things that didn't twinkle, that also moved among the stars. But there were other things like stars that, if a planet got close to another star, that was something important, notable, that could be called a star. So the definition of a star is a lot broader than we now know that we have balls of hydrogen and helium that have nuclear fusion in the core, and like none of that was known over 2,000 years ago. So there were fixed stars, there were moving stars called planets, just means wanderer, and there were falling stars. You see those shooting stars at night, little things streaking across the sky. Bearded stars and new stars that could appear.
Go back to the bearded stars and explain that.
Oh, we will. We're going to do that in the next slide.
Stars that need shade.
Yes, yeah, stars that look like John. There he is. Our newly bearded volunteer. So falling stars are really just little grains of sand, specks of dust left over from comets that go round and round and round around the sun and litter their orbit with little particles. Our Earth hits these little particles as it's moving along, and we see a streak of light in the sky. Now these are very brief, and they happen almost all the time. We just had the Leonids right before Thanksgiving. So, problem with this is that the three wise men probably came from the region we presently call Iran, and they probably had a many-month journey to get over here. So shooting stars or flying stars are far too short-lived for that to be the phenomenon. Here's your bearded star. Comets, so we call them now, and these are 5-10 mile wide-ish lumps of rock, rubble, frozen gases, and ices. And when they get close to the sun, the dust and the vaporized solid gases come streaming off of this rocky body away from the sun. So as it comes swinging in, it makes a beautiful tail in the sky and like that. And this can be seen for weeks or months, depending on where the Earth is moving or where the comet's moving and like that. So that doesn't sound like a very bad possibility. It's got some of these characteristics. But one of the most famous comets in history is Halley's Comet. And we can actually see this comet depicted in the tapestry at Bayeux, France. And it shows the events surrounding the Roman conquest of England in 1066. And in the inscription it says that people are marveling at the appearance of an unusual star. So there it is up there and there. And these people over here going, woo, just like you guys do. People don't change that much. But the problem is, usually historically, comets were harbingers of doom. They were scary, they were omens of evil. In superstition days of medieval England, as well as ancient Rome, they were called flaming swords or torches of doom. And we don't have a record of a comet appearing in the night skies at the time of the birth of Jesus. No tapestries, Chinese measurements, and the Chinese have made lots of good measurements in history of things going on in the sky. So that's not a good explanation for the Star of Bethlehem. We have fixed or new stars. This is a possibility. A new star, in olden terminology, is what we now know as a very old star. It's a star that has reached the end of its life, it's exhausted its nuclear fuel, its core collapses and bounces out and blasts colossal amounts of energy into space. Call them a nova or supernova. And these things can outshine their host galaxy for days or weeks at a time. It's really amazing. We do have historical records of one on July 4th, kind of appropriate, 1054 AD. There wasn't the United States around then, though. And it erupted into brilliance in Taurus the Bull. It was called a guest star. It outshined the full moon. It was visible in broad daylight for more than 2 months. It was quite an explosion. And when we look there now in Taurus, we see the Crab Nebula. In fact, if you take pictures just decades apart and compare them, you can see how little nodules of gas and dust still expanding away from the center. This is getting bigger all the time. You can actually calculate yourself, just using a little ruler and a little scale, when it blew up. And so it matches these observations that we have of the new star. But the supernova in 1054 is only one of 5 such events in recorded history, and none of them appear around 6 BC or even close. All right, so that's probably not one either. I guess we've got to go deeper. So who saw the star? Let's see if that helps us out. We have no evidence from the scriptures that suggests that Mary and Joseph saw the star. The shepherds didn't. They reported angels, but they did not report seeing a star. We know King Herod didn't see it because he had to ask the wise men about it. The only ones we know for certain who saw it were these wise men. So who were they? Let's see if this helps us out. The wise men, or as they called themselves the Magi, came from Persia, which is the Iranian region today. And the word Magi is the root of our modern words magic and magician. They were actually soothsayers or astrologers of the Zoroastrian religion. As high priests of the religion, it was their job to foretell events by looking at the stars and seeing what the planets were doing among them, or other things like bearded stars or new stars were showing up. So we had 5 objects that they would watch. Anybody name the 5 visible planets that known to ancient times?
Venus, Mercury, Mars, I don't know, Jupiter and Saturn probably.
Yep. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the 5. Technically, you can see Uranus out there, but you have to know exactly where you're looking. It's not, it wouldn't have stood out to them, and it never did. So if you have a star chart and someone else has told you where it is, you could find it. So that never made it into the watchings of the past. So to them, the planets are the signs. They were moved by the gods to foretell the future. Now, Jupiter goes around the sun in 12 Earth years. Saturn goes around every 30. They pass each other about every 20 years. And that sets the stage for something we find happened back then. So if it was not a supernatural miracle, which it certainly could have been, then there might be an astronomical, or to them, astrological problem, possibility. The Magi are the ones who were seeing it. So what we see happening at this time is what's called a triple conjunction. It's a very rare event where the planets, actually I have a picture, better than showing it like this. Got to remember my own presentation. Jupiter and Saturn are out in the solar system away from us. And they go slower than we do. So as we go zipping around once a year around the sun, we pass them when they're straight out. And just like going down the road, you're doing about 70 miles an hour on the interstate, you got some big semi-truck up ahead doing 60 miles an hour. So you're going along and you can see the trees going behind the truck from front back, so you know that that truck's moving too. But eventually you get up to it and you pass it and it looks like it's going backwards. And then as you go way down the road, you look back and you can see it's still coming. It's going 60 miles an hour. The trees are going in the front and peering out the back. So you know the truck never even slowed down, but it looked to you like it went backwards for a little bit. And the planets do the same thing as we pass. They seem to make a loop, called a retrograde loop, in among the stars. This takes a while to happen though, so it's not just one night. This takes weeks and weeks. Let's go back here. So Jupiter is known as the king of the planets, which is pretty insightful because we now know that it is the biggest planet in the solar system. But it was the brightest of the planets that went all the way around the sky. So that's why they gave it prominence in that. Saturn, the harvester or the reaper, passed each other 3 times in a year in Pisces, which to them, they knew as the house of the Hebrew. So the way they interpreted this was the time of the harvester has come, the king of the Hebrews is arriving at the dawn of the age of Pisces. And we also think that, you know, you get the Christian little fish that people put in the back of their car, that comes from the age of Pisces. So the present age is named for that little fishy, comes from that ichthys, I think is ichthys. And what's the next age? Anybody know?
Aquarius?
Aquarius. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. So that's the next age, and that's sort of like a, hey, get rid of that. Let's get on with doing some other age here. So that's actually probably 4 centuries away. So, but hey, the song is catchy. So, all right, so in Pisces the fish, the house of the Hebrews, they saw this triple conjunction happen. And can we kill the lights completely? Just for a slide here.
Now,
It's in the middle of this thing already.
you can kill the tree.
You can kill the tree. No, that's all. All right, so here, it'll do it again. Here's Saturn, here's Jupiter. That was the second pass, and here comes the third pass. I don't know why it's not starting over from the beginning, but it decided not to. So here comes the sun again. So March 10th, 6 BC. So I think it's gonna. All right, we'll do it again here. Inch it forward, and so here's Pisces, And where these 2 points cross is the equinox, the vernal equinox. There goes the sun. Here's Jupiter. Here comes Saturn, pass number 1. This is happening over a whole year's time. Pass number 2 coming up. You can see the moon zip through every month, so you can kind of get a feel of how fast months go by in this animation. Here's pass number 3. So triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn happening from 7 BC to 6 BC. And I had to zoom in to show this even closer, and this one doesn't want to animate at all. So remember, PowerPoint animations are always have attitude. So, all right, you can bring the lights. So remember, events, even interesting configurations, as well as moving bright objects, could have been labeled stars. These are rare events. On average, they occur about every 456 years is what I found. I plotted through an awful lot of this computer program and websites to find the other dates where this even kind of happened. And it had never happened in Pisces, the house of the Hebrew, since the Zoroastrian religion was founded, which is around 600 BC.
Only every 20 years?
No, they seem to pass each other in the sky, from our point of view, every 20 years. We go by every year.
So when's the next time they'd be visible?
When do you pass each other?
Yeah.
Was that the latest?
Like 2200 or something like that, is that right?
Yeah, 22.
Yeah. So if you're here, the year 2239. Yeah. It'll happen.
Oh, so there hasn't been one. There's like a almost, sorry.
1682. Yeah, was the previous. Yes.
Yeah, and it says that they followed the star,
Mm-hmm.
then that implied that it moved, and for them to follow that,
Mhm.
how is that possible over that time frame?
I have wondered about that, and that I don't have an answer for. So, right. Yep. Yes.
The date on there that you showed just briefly was March 6th. How did you come up with that particular date on the triple conjunction?
That was the end of that, so it went from 7 to 6, spanning that. The graphic just didn't show it. The animation started in the middle of it. I could go back and see if it'll behave nicely. There we go. So I actually start the simulation at March 22nd, 7 BC. And here, the sun would be pretty close to him. And so once the sun, it takes 1 minute for this to start. Once the sun is away, then this would have been clear in the evening western sky and been visible all night long. And then as the sun comes in again, you're now losing it in the morning sky. So this would have been one nighttime year each night, seeing this moving along. So, but we can let that play. I can do more questions. At least it's starting from the beginning again. I had 1 minute of pause built in here so I could show you the equinox. I could show you Pisces right through here. There's Pegasus up at the very top of the screen. All that is over here on the very left edge of our wall.
There it goes.
And our wall starts there probably because it's close to the vernal equinox, the 0 point in our measuring system around the sky. Another question?
What does the star always do in the night?
What do they do?
Maybe you might also want to point out that there's a conjunction with Mars also.
Yeah, in the end you get Mars come in. And some writers have said that Jesus is also said to be the coming warrior, and that Mars is the planet of war, or Ares, and the god of war. So, yeah, there's another little footnote for that too. So yeah, the rest of the time, these are just visible. In fact, you'll be able to go up and look at Jupiter in the telescope afterwards. You'll be able to see what Jupiter looks like. Another question or two? Yes?
What other observations in other cultures like China, Russia, or the Middle East verify this biblical testimony?
Actually, I gave a presentation at church back in May called The Gospel in the Stars. And I go through all the constellations of the zodiac, showing how the Gospel is also, just by the meaning, you can see Virgo, the Virgin, and then working Libra, the scales, the balance of good and evil, which is the false gospel. It's not how much good you do. And that's right next to Scorpio, the scorpion, which is the sting of death. Then you have Sagittarius shooting an arrow into the scorpion, doing battle with it. So that's your first Christ picture. And it goes on around like that. So I did go to other cultures and showed that there's a very similar meaning for a lot of the constellations. So implying that maybe God would write the in people's hearts, and they all saw similar things.
Where's Pisces? Is specific.
Pisces is the big blue V right through here.
Oh, okay.
And there's one fishy over here, and the other fishy's off the top, and they've got a cord.
So what part of the fish is that bee supposed to be?
It's a cord connecting them, I think. They're tied together. I don't know why you have fish tied together. But
You got them on a stringer.
yeah.
Burn through the guild.
Keeps it from swimming out of the zodiac. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And please enjoy the view in the telescope tonight. You got lots of time, beautiful sky. Take your time, take your coats up there, and stay warm because it's chilly.
The nativity story?
Which?
The nativity story?
Nativity?
Nativity.
Nativity? Yeah. Movie?
Movie.
I haven't.
They talk about that too. The Magi are looking to have this like reflecting pool in the middle of their